The venue bill was $42,000. I had paid a $10,000 deposit 6 months before the wedding. My parents were covering the remaining $32,000. That was the arrangement. Agreed on clearly. Spoken about multiple times. Written in a family group chat that still existed on my phone, with my sister's name right there in the member list. But on the morning after my wedding, I woke up at 6:47 in the hotel room. I was supposed to be sharing with my new husband in a state of honeymoon happiness, and I lay there in the white sheets staring at the ceiling, and I thought about the look on my sister's face when she stood up, and I picked up my phone, and I called the venue coordinator. And I made one change. And that change is what this whole story is about. My name is Sophie Hartley. I am 31 years old. I am a project manager for a construction firm, and I have spent 6 years of my professional life managing timelines and budgets and the specific chaos of multiple things happening simultaneously and needing to stay calm while all of it unfolds. I am not a dramatic person. I do not make impulsive decisions. I think things through. I make lists. I consider consequences before I act. What I did that morning was not impulsive. I had been thinking about it since approximately 9:47 the previous evening, when my sister Chloe stood up at my wedding reception with a champagne glass in her hand and a smile on her face that I had seen 1,000 times before, and announced to 230 people that she was 12 weeks pregnant. 12 weeks. She had known for 12 weeks. She had sat across from me at my kitchen table 6 weeks before my wedding, helping me address envelopes, and she had known for 6 weeks at that point. She had come to my final dress fitting 4 weeks before the wedding, and she had known. She had been at my bachelorette weekend 3 weeks before the wedding, and she had known. She had stood beside me as my maid of honor and held my bouquet while I said my vows. And she had known. And she had chosen my wedding reception in front of 230 people. On the night that was supposed to be mine and my husband Tom's, to make her announcement. If you are new here, please subscribe and hit the like button right now. And please stay until the end of this story, because what happened in the weeks after that morning phone call to the venue is something that pulled apart and then very slowly rebuilt almost every relationship in my life. Every part matters. Do not go anywhere. Let me tell you about the moment itself first, because I need you to feel it before I tell you what I did about it. The reception was going beautifully. I want to say that clearly because I think it matters. It was genuinely the most beautiful evening of my life up until 9:47. The venue was a restored estate house 40 minutes outside the city, with ivy on the walls and long wooden tables inside and candles everywhere, and a string quartet that played while people ate, and a band that started at 8 and that had the dance floor full within 20 minutes. Tom had cried when I walked down the aisle 3 times. Not once. 3 separate times at 3 different moments during the ceremony. And each time I loved him more than the time before. The food was extraordinary. The speeches were warm and funny, and my best friend Claire gave a toast that made half the room laugh and the other half reach for tissues simultaneously. Tom's dad danced in a way that became the main topic of conversation for the rest of the evening. People were happy. Genuinely, completely, visibly happy. I was happy. I was so happy that I had a moment during the first dance where I thought, this is it. This is the exact moment I will think about when I am old and trying to remember the best days of my life. Right here. This song. This man. This room. And then at 9:47, Chloe stood up. She did not ask the band to pause. She just stood up, and she clinked her glass the way people do when they want the room's attention, and the room gave it to her, because she is Chloe. And rooms always give her their attention because she is the kind of person who fills a room in a way that is very hard to explain, unless you have been in a room with her. She said she had an announcement. She said she had been waiting for the right moment. She said she could not think of a more perfect night to share the most wonderful news of her life. She said she was 12 weeks pregnant. The room erupted. Not in a bad way. The room did not know it was doing anything wrong. 230 people heard the word pregnant at a wedding reception and responded the way people respond. They cheered. They clapped. People stood up. Her husband Marcus had tears in his eyes. My mother made a sound I recognized from the other side of the room. My father started laughing. And I stood on the edge of the dance floor in my wedding dress, and I watched it happen. Tom's hand found mine. He squeezed it once. He did not say anything. He did not need to, because Tom has known me for 4 years, and he knew exactly what was happening on my face, even when my face was not showing it. He could feel it in the way my hand went slightly still in his. The specific stillness of a person who has been hit by something and is deciding in real time whether to fall or to stay standing. I stayed standing. I smiled. I walked over to Chloe and I hugged her, and I said congratulations. And I meant it, and I also meant approximately 14 other things simultaneously that I did not say. And then the band started playing again, and the night continued, and people danced and ate cake, and gradually the announcement became part of the evening rather than the center of it, but it never fully left the center for me. I could feel it there all night. The specific weight of something that has happened that cannot be unhappened, sitting in the room with me for the rest of my wedding. Tom and I left at midnight. We got into the car the venue had arranged, and we drove to the hotel. And he held my hand the whole way, and neither of us said anything about it until we were in the hotel room with the door closed, and then he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I do not know yet." And he said, "What do you need?" And I said, "I need to sleep. And then I need to think." He said, "Okay." And that was it. That was all we said about it that night. I lay in the dark and I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about $42,000. I thought about the deposit I had paid. I thought about my parents covering the rest. I thought about the arrangement that had been agreed on clearly and spoken about multiple times and confirmed in the family group chat. I thought about Chloe's face when she stood up. That smile. The specific quality of that smile. The smile of a person who has been waiting to do something and is finally doing it, and is experiencing the satisfaction of the moment landing exactly as they planned. She had planned it. That was the thing I kept coming back to as I lay there in the dark. She had not made a spontaneous decision in an emotional moment. 12 weeks pregnant means she had known since before my bachelorette weekend. 12 weeks pregnant means she had known at my final dress fitting. 12 weeks pregnant means she had sat across from me, addressing envelopes at my kitchen table with this information already fully formed inside her, and had said nothing, and had chosen my wedding reception, in front of 230 people. On the most important night of my life. I picked up my phone at 6:47. I called the venue coordinator, whose name was Janet, and who was professional and warm, and who answered despite the early hour, because venues that charge $42,000 for an evening employ people who answer early morning calls from brides. I said, "Janet, I need to make a change to the billing arrangement for last night." She said, "Of course. What would you like to change?" And I told her, and there was a pause on the line. And then she said, "I can action that this morning. Is there anything else you need?" I said, "No thank you, Janet." I hung up. I put my phone face down on the pillow beside me. Tom was still asleep. I lay back, and I looked at the ceiling, and I felt something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite peace, but was somewhere between the two. The feeling of a person who has made a decision that is going to have consequences, and who has decided that the consequences are worth it. I had not told Tom yet. I was going to tell him at breakfast. But first, I needed to lie there for a little while longer and let the decision settle, because what I had just done was going to change everything. And I needed a few more minutes of the quiet before everything changed. I need to tell you about my sister before any of what comes next makes sense. Not because I want to make her the villain of this story. I have spent a lot of time in the months since my wedding thinking about whether Chloe is a villain, and I keep coming back to the same answer, which is that she is not. She is something more complicated than a villain. She is a person who has spent her entire life being the most important person in every room she has ever been in, and who has never once had to learn what to do when a room is not for her. Chloe is 28, 3 years younger than me. She is the kind of beautiful that makes strangers look twice, and she has always known it and worn it with an ease that I genuinely admired when we were growing up, even when that ease made rooms tilt in her direction and away from mine. She is funny and warm, and she has a laugh that makes other people laugh just from hearing it. She is my sister, and I love her, and both of those things are true at the same time as everything else I am about to tell you. She has always been the center, not because my parents created that deliberately. I do not think they sat down and decided to make Chloe the center and me the edge. It happened the way those things happen in families, which is gradually and quietly, and through 1,000 small decisions that each seem reasonable on their own, and only show their shape when you look at all of them together from a distance. Chloe was the easier baby. My mother told me this herself when I was old enough to understand what it meant. She said I was colicky and difficult in the early months, and that Chloe came along and was just content, happy, easy. And my mother said it in the way that people say things they do not realize carry a particular weight, just as information, just as a memory. Not understanding that what I was hearing was the origin story of something that had shaped my entire childhood. Chloe got attention because she needed it less, and somehow that meant she received it more. I got attention when I asked for it, and I learned early that asking for it produced results so unreliable that eventually I stopped asking and started handling things myself. By the time we were teenagers, the dynamic was established in a way that neither of us would have been able to articulate, but that we both lived inside completely. Chloe had parties and my parents hosted them. Chloe had dramas and my parents mediated them. Chloe had achievements and my parents celebrated them loudly and publicly, in the way that parents celebrate things that confirm what they already believed about a child. I had achievements too. I want to be clear about that. I was good at school. I got into a good university. I built a career I am genuinely proud of. But my achievements happened quietly and were acknowledged quietly. And I had learned to be okay with that, because being okay with it was easier than being not okay with it. Looking back now, there were so many moments that should have told me something. Chloe missed my university graduation because she had a trip booked. She had booked the trip after the graduation date was announced. My parents went to the graduation, and they were warm and proud, and it was a good day. But Chloe sent a text that said, "Sorry, babe. Have the best day." And I replied with a heart emoji, and did not think about it again for approximately 6 years. Chloe announced her engagement at Christmas dinner the year before my own engagement. Tom and I had been together for 2 years at that point, and were heading somewhere serious, and everyone at that dinner knew it, and Chloe stood up at the table and said she and Marcus had news, and everyone turned to her. And I thought for 1 second that she might say something about us. She did not. She had her own news, which was completely legitimate. It was her engagement. She was allowed to announce it at Christmas dinner. But the way she looked at me when she said it, just for a second, just a fraction of a second before the room erupted, she looked at me. And at that point, I did not know what to do with that look, so I filed it somewhere and smiled and congratulated her and meant it. Tom proposed 4 months later, privately. Just us. On a walk we took every Sunday morning through the park near our flat. He stopped at the bench we always stopped at, and he had the ring in his jacket pocket. And he said, "I have been trying to figure out the perfect moment for this for about 3 months. And I have realized there is no perfect moment. There is just the moment, and this is it." And I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my parents first. They were thrilled. Genuinely. Completely thrilled. I called Chloe second. She said, "Oh my God, Sophie, that is amazing." And then she said, "So when are you thinking for the wedding?" And I said, "We have not talked about it yet. We literally just got engaged 20 minutes ago." And she said, of course, enjoy it." And she was warm and excited and said all the right things. But something about the way she moved on to the "when are you thinking" very quickly sat somewhere in the back of my mind. At that point, I did not realize how important that detail would be. We set the wedding date 7 months out, a Saturday in June. We chose the venue and paid the deposit and started the planning, and Chloe was involved in all of it. She was my maid of honor. She came to every venue visit. She had opinions about flowers and about the menu and about the band, and I welcomed all of it because she was my sister. And this was what sisters did, and I loved her and wanted her involved. There were moments during the planning where something felt slightly off. A comment she made at the florist about how she thought peonies were overdone but said it as a question, so it was technically my choice. A suggestion at the menu tasting that we consider a different seating arrangement that would have put her table closer to the front. A conversation about the speeches, where she mentioned twice that she had a lot to say and hoped the time limit was flexible. Each thing on its own was nothing. Together they had a texture that I could feel, but not name. And then the wedding happened, and at 9:47 she stood up. And I felt the texture of all those small moments suddenly become something I could see clearly. The morning after the wedding, I lay in the hotel room, and I thought about every single one of those moments, and I understood something I had been not understanding for my entire life. Chloe did not do these things to hurt me. That is the complicated part. That is the part that makes her a complicated person, rather than a villain. She did not stand up at my wedding reception because she wanted to ruin my night. She stood up because she genuinely could not conceive of a situation in which her news was not the most important thing in a room. She had never had to conceive of that. Every room she had ever been in had organized itself around her naturally and without resistance, and she had no framework for the idea that a room might not be hers. My wedding reception was not hers, and she had not understood that, or she had understood it, and the understanding had not been strong enough to override the habit of a lifetime. I did not know which of those it was. I was not sure it mattered. What I knew was that I had just paid $42,000 for an evening, and that the person who had been named as maid of honor and had been involved in every decision about that evening had chosen it as the backdrop for her own announcement. And I had made a phone call at 6:47 in the morning, and things were about to get very complicated. What I had not anticipated was that the complication would not come from Chloe first. It would come from my mother, and it would come faster than I expected. My mother called at 8:14 in the morning. Tom was in the shower. I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed, in the white robe the hotel provided, and I had just ordered room service, and I was looking at the breakfast menu trying to decide between eggs and pancakes when her name appeared on my screen. I picked up. She said, "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling this morning?" I said, "Good. Tired. Happy." She said last night was just beautiful. It really was. Everything was perfect. I said it was. She said, "And Chloe's news. Can you believe it? A baby. I am going to be a grandmother." I said yes. It was a surprise. There was a slight pause. She said, "Did you know beforehand?" I said no. Another pause. She said, "Well, she was so excited." She could not hold it in any longer, apparently. "You know how Chloe is." And there it was. You know how Chloe is. I had been hearing that sentence my entire life. You know how Chloe is. And Tower Plowell said with warmth. And Tower Plowell said with affection. And Tower Plowell. And Tower Plowell said as an explanation. That was also an absolution. You know how Chloe is meant. Chloe cannot help it. You know how Chloe is meant. This is just who she is. You know how Chloe is meant. We love her for it, even when it costs someone else something. I said yes. I know how Chloe is. My mother said she is going to call you later today to talk properly. She felt bad that she upstaged you a little. Those were her words, by the way. Upstaged you a little. I thought that was honest of her. I said it was. My mother said, "You are not upset, are you?" And that question, that specific question, delivered in that specific tone. The tone that says, I am asking, but I am also telling you what the correct answer is. The tone that my mother had been using my entire life to navigate situations where Chloe had done something that required navigation. The tone that said, the right answer here is no, I am not upset, because being upset would require a conversation that is more complicated than any of us wants to have. I had spent my whole life giving the right answer. I said, I need to tell you something, Mom. She said, of course. What is it? I said, I called the venue this morning. I made a change to the billing arrangement. Silence. I said, the remaining $32,000, the portion you and Dad were going to cover. I have redirected the invoice. She said, redirected it where? I said, to Chloe and Marcus. The silence that followed was different from the previous silences. It had a different quality. The quality of a person who has heard something that does not fit any of the frameworks they had prepared for this conversation. She said, Sophie. I said, I know. She said, you cannot be serious. I said, I am completely serious. She said she is pregnant. I said, I know she is pregnant. She announced it at my wedding. My mother said, that is not fair. She did not mean to. I said, Mom, she was 12 weeks pregnant. She knew for 12 weeks. She made a choice. My mother said she was excited she could not. I said, she could not what? She could not wait one more day. She could not tell me privately and let me share the moment with her. She could not think about what it might mean to make that announcement on my wedding night in front of 230 people. My mother was quiet. I said, I love Chloe. I genuinely love her. And I want to celebrate this baby, and I will celebrate this baby. But I paid $42,000 for that evening, and she used it. And I think it is fair that the cost reflects that. My mother said, this is going to cause a huge problem. I said, probably yes. She said, your father is going to. I said, I know. She said, Chloe is going to be devastated. I said, she will have feelings about it. Yes. My mother, said Sophie. Please think about this. I said, I have thought about it. I thought about it for most of last night. She said, you just got married. This is supposed to be a happy time. I said, it is a happy time. I am very happy. I am sitting in a hotel room on the morning after my wedding, and I am happy, and I have also made a decision that I am standing by. My mother said, I cannot believe you are doing this. I said, I love you, Mom. I have to go. Tom is out of the shower. I hung up. Tom was not out of the shower. I could still hear the water running. I sat on the edge of the bed and I held my phone in both hands, and I felt the specific feeling of having said a true thing to someone who did not want to hear it and of not taking it back. My father called 11 minutes later. His call was shorter and louder and covered the same ground in a more direct way. He said it was vindictive. I said it was proportionate. He said Chloe was pregnant, and I should be thinking about that. I said I was thinking about it. He said this was not the way to handle things. I said I was interested in how he would suggest handling them. He did not have an answer for that he delivered. He said we would talk about it when Tom and I were back from the honeymoon. I said that was fine. I hung up. Tom came out of the bathroom in a cloud of steam and looked at my face and said what happened. And I told him everything. The phone call to the venue. The conversation with my mother. The conversation with my father. All of it. He sat down on the bed beside me and he listened to the whole thing without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about him. He does not perform listening. He actually does it. When I finished, he said, "Do you want to know what I think?" I said yes. He said, "I think you did something brave, and I think it is going to be complicated, and I think you already knew both of those things when you made the call." I said yes. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think so. I will be." He said, "Okay. Then let us order breakfast and not talk about this again until we are back from the honeymoon." I said, "That sounds like the best idea anyone has had in the last 12 hours. We ordered breakfast. We ate it on the balcony of the hotel room looking out over the city. And for a few hours, we were just married and happy and not thinking about the phone calls that were probably already happening between my mother and my sister and my father and whoever else had been pulled into the orbit of what I had done. The honeymoon was 2 weeks. We went somewhere warm, and we lay on a beach, and we ate good food, and we did not talk about the wedding, or the venue, or the invoice that was now sitting in Chloe's inbox. But on the last night of the honeymoon, I checked my phone, and I had 47 messages, and none of them were from Chloe. We got back on a Sunday afternoon. Our flat felt different after 2 weeks away, the way flats always feel different after you've been somewhere else for a while. Slightly smaller, slightly more familiar. The specific combination of your own things and your own smells, and the particular quality of light through your own windows that means you are home. I put my suitcase in the bedroom, and I made tea, and I sat at the kitchen table, and I looked at my phone. 47 messages, most of them from my mother. 7 from my father. 3 from extended family members I had not expected to be involved. 2 from Chloe's husband Marcus. 0 from Chloe. That 0 was the thing I kept coming back to. Chloe had not contacted me once in 2 weeks. Not to respond to the invoice. Not to call. Not to text. Not even a voice note or an emoji. Nothing. I had expected anger. I had expected a call where she said, "What the hell, Sophie?" I had been prepared for that call. I had thought about what I would say and how I would say it, and I had felt ready for the conversation, even if I was not looking forward to it. The silence was something I had not prepared for. I read through my mother's messages in order. They started on the morning I had spoken to her. In the first few, they were an extension of our phone call, the same points made in text form. "It is not fair. She is pregnant. You need to think about this more carefully." Then there was a gap of about 6 hours. And then the tone changed. She wrote that she had spoken to Chloe. That Chloe was not angry. That Chloe was hurt. Those were her exact words. Not angry. Hurt. And my mother said that distinction mattered, and that I needed to understand the difference. I read that message twice. My mother had always been very good at reframing things. She had spent 31 years being very good at reframing things in ways that made Chloe the feeling one and me the behaving one. Chloe felt things, I did things, and the doing was always positioned as the problem, regardless of what had caused it. I kept reading. 3 days into the honeymoon, my mother's messages shifted again. She said she and my father had talked, and they understood that I was upset, but that they thought the invoice was an extreme response, and they were asking me to reconsider. She said they would still cover the $32,000 if I would just withdraw the invoice to Chloe. I had not responded to any of these messages. I responded to this one. I said, "Thank you for the offer. I am not withdrawing the invoice." She did not reply for 4 hours. Then she said, "We will talk when you are home." Marcus's 2 messages were interesting. The first was sent 3 days after the wedding. It said, "Sophie, I think we need to talk." The tone was not angry. It was careful. The tone of a man who is caught between his wife's feelings and his own understanding of what had happened. The second was sent a week later. It said, "I hope you are having a good honeymoon. Whenever you are ready to talk, I am here." I had not responded to either. Tom read over my shoulder for parts of this, and then made more tea without being asked, and put a mug in front of me without saying anything and sat down across the table. He said, "Well." I said, "Well." He said, "So what happens now?" I said, "I think I need to call Marcus." He said, "Not Chloe." I said, "Not Chloe. Not yet. Chloe needs to come to me when she is ready, and I cannot make that happen by calling her." He said, "What about your parents?" I said, "I will see them this week. In person. Not on the phone." He said, "Do you want me to come?" I said, "Yes, please." He said, "Okay." I called Marcus that evening. He answered on the second ring. He said, "Sophie." "Hi." I said, "Hi, Marcus. How are you?" He said honestly. It has been a complicated 2 weeks. I said I imagine it has. He said Chloe is. He paused. She is really struggling with this. I want to be honest with you because I think honesty is more useful than anything else right now. I said I appreciate that. Please be honest. He said she genuinely does not understand why what she did was wrong. I know that probably sounds incredible to you, but she genuinely cannot see it as a problem. She sees it as sharing happy news at a happy event. She does not understand why the timing was an issue. I sat with that for a moment. I said, does she understand that she knew for 12 weeks? That she made a choice about when and where? He said, she sees the timing as organic. She was there. The moment felt right. She made the announcement. I said the moment felt right at someone else's wedding reception. He said, I know how that sounds. I am not defending it. I am trying to explain it. I said, I know, Marcus. I know you are not defending it. He said the invoice. He paused again. Sophie, the invoice was a significant thing. $32,000. We do not have that sitting around. I said, I know you do not. He said, so what happens now? Oj da. Vaksam indaf. Buzz invoice. Mashinhanites. Is it real? Are you actually expecting us to pay it? And that was the question I had been sitting with for 2 weeks, on a beach somewhere warm, trying to decide the answer to. Because here is the truth about the invoice. It was always more symbolic than financial. I did not actually expect Chloe and Marcus to pay $32,000. I had never expected that. What I had expected was that sending the invoice would do what it had done, which was to make a point that could not be softened or reframed or turned into, you know how Sophie is. The point was this. Actions have costs. The evening had a cost. And when you use someone else's evening for your own purposes, it is reasonable to consider what that use means. I said, Marcus. The invoice was a statement. It was not a demand for immediate payment. He was quiet for a moment. He said, she needs to hear that from you. I said, I know. He said, she is not going to call you. I do not think she knows how to. She is not good at being in the wrong. I said, I know she is not. He said, can you call her? I thought about it. I said, not yet, but soon. I need a few more days. Nansa. He said, okay, thank you for calling, Sophie. Genuinely. It means a lot that you called. I said, I love your wife, Marcus, even right now. That has not changed. He said, I know. She loves you too. She just does not know how to show it when it would require admitting something she cannot admit yet. We hung up. I sat at my kitchen table and I drank my tea and I thought about Chloe not knowing how to be in the wrong. And I thought about my mother and my father and the dinner we were going to have at their house on Wednesday. And I thought about the thing I had decided to say at that dinner that I had not told Tom about yet. The invoice was only part of what I had planned. The dinner at my parents' house was on a Wednesday evening, 7 days after we got back. Tom and I drove over together. He held my hand on the motorway the way he always does. We did not talk much. There was not a lot to say that had not already been said. We had talked about everything I was planning to say that evening, and he had listened and asked questions. And at the end, he had said, I support you. Whatever you decide to do in that room, I support you. That was enough. My parents were in the kitchen when we arrived. My mother was cooking something that smelled like the specific roast she made for significant occasions, which told me she had decided this was a significant occasion and had prepared accordingly. My father was at the kitchen table with a glass of wine, and the look of a man who had been thinking about something for a week and had not arrived at a conclusion. Chloe was not there. I had not expected her to be. We sat down. We ate. The conversation was careful in the way that conversations are careful when everyone in the room is aware of the thing nobody has said yet and is trying to decide who is going to say it first. My father said it first. He said so. The invoice. I said yes. He said, are you withdrawing it? I said no. My mother put her fork down. My father, said Sophie. $32,000 is not a statement. It is a demand. I said I told Marcus it was a statement. My father said Marcus is not the one who received it. I said no, Chloe is. And Chloe has not called me. In 3 weeks. Not once. My mother said she does not know what to say. I said, I know. Marcus told me she does not understand why what she did was wrong. And I have thought about that a lot over the last 3 weeks. And I have come to understand that the invoice is not actually the main thing I want to talk about tonight. Both of my parents looked at me. Tom was very still beside me. I said I want to talk about the pattern, not the pregnancy announcement specifically. The pattern, of which the pregnancy announcement is just the most recent example. My mother said, what pattern? I said, the pattern where Chloe does something that affects me, and it gets explained away. You know how Chloe is. She was excited. She did not mean to. And I am expected to understand and adjust and accommodate and move on. That pattern. The one that has been running for as long as I can remember. My father said, that is not fair. I said, I think it is accurate. I am not saying it to be unkind. I am saying it because I think it is true. And because I think we have all been living inside it for so long that none of us can see it from the outside. My mother was quiet. I said, I am not angry at Chloe. I want to be really clear about that. I am not angry at her. She is who she has always been. She does not know how to be in a room that is not for her. Because she has never had to learn. And I think that is something that happened across a very long time, with a lot of small contributions from a lot of different directions, including this table. My father said we never treated you differently. I said you treated us according to who we were. Chloe needed more and she got more. I needed less apparently and I got less. I do not think you did it deliberately. I think you did it the way you do most things in families, which is without fully realizing you were doing it. My mother said that is not. I said, Mom, I am not here to make you feel terrible. I am genuinely not. I am here because something happened at my wedding that made it impossible for me to keep not saying this. And I think not saying it has cost all of us something. Including Chloe. Silence. My father said, and the invoice. I said, the invoice stays until Chloe calls me. Not to discuss the money. Just to talk. The way sisters talk. The invoice is not about money. It is about acknowledgement. I need her to acknowledge that what she did had an effect on me. That is all. My mother had tears in her eyes. She said I did not realize. I said, I know. She said we should have seen it better. I said yes. Probably. But we are seeing it now. And that is where we start. My father said. And if Chloe does not call, I said, then we will cross that when we get to it. But I think she will. Marcus will help her get there. And I think somewhere underneath all of it she knows. She just needs time to get to the knowing. We finished dinner. It was not a resolution. It was not a scene from a film where everything is understood and repaired in one evening, and everyone leaves feeling lighter. It was just a dinner where some true things were finally said in a room where they had not been said before. And that was enough. For that night, Chloe called me 11 days after the dinner. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk at work, and her name came up on my phone, and I looked at it for 2 rings, and then I picked up. She said hi. I said hi. She said, I do not know how to do this. I said, I know. She said, I keep trying to understand why it was wrong, and I keep getting stuck. Because in my head, I was just sharing something I was happy about. I said, I know. That is how it felt. She said, but. I said, but it was my wedding, Chloe. The one evening in my entire life that was specifically supposed to be mine. And you had known for 12 weeks. And you chose that moment. She was quiet. Then she said, I think I chose it because I knew everyone would be happy. And everyone being happy is the thing She stopped. The thing I need. More than I realized. That was the most honest thing Chloe had ever said to me in our entire lives. I said, I know. She said, I am sorry, Sophie. Genuinely, I am sorry. I said, I know you are. She said, the invoice. I said, the invoice is done. You do not owe me anything. She said, Sophie. I said, you called. That is what I needed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, can I come over this week? I said, yes. She said, just us. No parents. No Marcus. Just us. I said, yes. Thursday. Come for dinner. She said, okay. She came on Thursday. I made pasta because pasta is easy, and we used to eat it together as teenagers when we stayed up late watching films, and it felt like the right thing to make for an evening where we were trying to find our way back to something that had existed before all of this. We talked for 4 hours. Not about the wedding. Not at first. About her pregnancy. About how she was feeling. About the baby, and what she was hoping for, and what she was scared about. About Marcus, and how he had been during all of this. About Tom, and how I was feeling, being newly married. And then near the end of the evening she said, can I ask you something? I said yes. She said, have I always done this? Taken up too much space in our family? Though with you, I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, I think you have always been given a lot of space, and I think you grew into the shape of it. And I think neither of us really looked at what that meant for the space I was getting until very recently. She said, that is a kind way of saying yes. I said, it is an honest way of saying, it is complicated. She said, I am going to try to be different. I do not know if I will always manage it, but I am going to try. I said, that is all anyone can do. She left at 11. I washed up the pasta bowls, and Tom came into the kitchen and leaned against the counter and said, well. I said, well. He said, how did it go? I said, it went somewhere real. Which is more than I expected. He said, are you okay? I said, yes. I think I actually am. Here's where things are now. Chloe and I are building something. Slowly. Not the version of the relationship we had before, which was warm on the surface and slightly unexamined underneath. Something more honest. More careful. More actual. My parents and I are doing the same. My mother calls me on Sundays, and she asks how I am, and she waits for the real answer. My father sent me a message last month that just said, I have been thinking about what you said at dinner. I think you were right. That was the whole message. 4 sentences. From my father. It meant more than most things anyone has said to me in a long time. Chloe is 6 months pregnant now. I am going to be an aunt. I am genuinely excited about that. Not in a performed way. In the real way that comes from loving someone, even when loving them is complicated, and wanting their child to be in the world, even when the path to that wanting was difficult. The invoice was never about $32,000. It was about 28 years of yes, I understand, and of course. And you know how Chloe is, and I am fine, and it all just built up to one morning in a hotel room where I picked up a phone and redirected something. And by redirecting the invoice, I redirected something else. Something that had been going in one direction for a very long time. And it is going somewhere different now. Not perfect. Not fixed. But different. And different in the right direction is more than enough. If you made it to the end of Sophie's story, thank you. Genuinely thank you. This one had so many layers, and you stayed through all of them. If any part of it got you, the moment at 9:47, the call to the venue at 6:47, the invoice, the dinner at her parents', or that Thursday night with pasta and 4 hours of finally talking, drop it in the comments right now. Tell me which moment stopped you. I read every single one. If Sophie's story moved you, please share it right now. Send it to someone who has always been the one who understood, the one who accommodated, the one who made space for everyone else, and quietly got less space in return. They need to hear that redirecting something is allowed. Like this video if you stayed until the very last word. Subscribe, because my next story is going to stop you completely. I will see you then.